Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for joining EBDVF. We have now joined the session on the role and impact of research programs and projects leveraging AI and big data to fight COVID. Sorry for the very long title, but I promise that the title is maybe less exciting than the content of the session itself. We have a lot of interesting content and speakers that have joined us today, so I hope you will stay with us until the end. Before we go and we dig into the content of today, maybe just a quick special mention to our sponsors, to the EBDVF sponsors who have made all this event possible. So we have a lot of organization sponsors, but a warm thank you also to the projects who sponsored EBDVF, and I've organized a lot of interesting sessions today, yesterday, and tomorrow. Do not hesitate to go and visit their exhibition areas because there's a lot of networking and contents that await for you there. And again, sorry for being focusing on the technical part before going to the content, but just a few housekeeping rules for this session to go smoothly. So as you have noticed, everybody is on mute except for the chair and the panelists. And as you have been notified by Zoom, this session is being recorded. Just to reassure you that your name and the questions that you ask will not be part of the recording. But if you object in any way to this recording being shared by BDBA later on, just inform us by writing a quick email to info@corebdba.eu, and we will deal with the matter accordingly, of course. Although the Q&A is not shown in Zoom, we really encourage you to ask as many questions as you wish on the Q&A chat of VUVA. So we will keep an eye on that, and we hopefully have some interesting contents that comes from the Q&A chat to discuss at the end with our panelists. And of course, if there is any technical issue that you're experiencing, please contact us at the functional mailbox of BDVA, and we will try to support you. To start the session, I would like to introduce myself and introduce my guest speakers. So my name is Martina Barbero. I'm the chair of this session, and I work as operational managers at the Big Data Value Association. And I'm here today with 5 amazing panelists from different organizations, which I warmly thank for their time and for their availability. So we have Ms. Saida Rinne from the European Commission, DG Connect. She's head of sector in the unit on e-health, well-being and aging, and we really thank her for her presence. We have Mr. Haider from the University of Medicine Charité, and he's here in his role of coordinator of the National Research Network of the University of Medicine on COVID-19. So he will speak about the German experience and the coordination of this network. A really big thank to Mr. Haider as well. We have then 3 representatives of 3 very interesting, well, several interesting projects funded at the European level and aimed at fighting against COVID-19. So we have Ms. Anna Katani-Scholz, who is Delegate of Key Technologies at the Helmholtz Association Brussels office. Thank you very much, Anna, for joining us. We have Dr. Emerson, who is an application specialist at Cineca in Italy. So a very warm thank to Andrew as well. And we have also Professor Giudici, last but not least, of course, who is Professor of Statistics and Data Science at the Department of Economics and Management of the University of Pavia. So really rich panel. Big thank to all of them for their time. And now, without further delay, let's look at the agenda for today. So after a very brief introduction from me, we will give the floor to the European Commission first. So Ms. Rinne will present us the perspective of the European Commission on leveraging AI and big data for fighting COVID-19. Then we give the floor to Mr. Haider, and we will get a bit of the German perspective and the question of research networks and initiatives to fight COVID. And after that, we will go into the project experience. So we will have first Ms. Anna Katani-Scholz, and then Dr. Emerson and Professor Giudici, so in this order. And hopefully we will have time at the end for a roundtable discussion before a short wrap-up and conclusion. So just very briefly from my side, I don't want to steal the scene. I don't want to take too much time from our speakers. What I wanted to mention before we started is that, of course, there have been a lot of research programs and initiatives that were launched already last winter, so at the beginning of the crisis. The figures are quite impressive in terms of the amount that has been spent, for instance, under Horizon 2020 in the last year, for collaborative research on health, which is more than 500 million euro, of which the vast majority actually went to projects specifically targeting the pandemic. So more than 103 projects according to the September's figures, and nearly 700 participants from member states and beyond. The Commission also worked on other initiatives that are not really linked to funding in itself. There has been the ERA versus Corona Action Plan, which was released by the European Commission and the member states, and which lays down 10 priority actions to tackle coronavirus. Very interesting action plan. ERA stands for European Research Area, of course. And then there has also been the manifesto for the EU COVID research, which was launched in July. This is very interesting from the EBDVF perspective because it's about, of course, sharing results and sharing data and maximize accessibility to data and research results to fight against COVID. So that's really relevant for our data sharing perspective. And it has today more than 2,000 signatures. Last but not least, we also have the news of the European Interoperability Gateway for the coronavirus tracking apps, which went live in October. And according to my information, I think there are 3 countries that are now notified. So we have Germany, Italy, and Ireland, for which the corona tracking apps are interoperable at the moment. So this is not only about AI and big data research, but it's a lot of activities that have been carried out by the European Commission. And there's much more to come, of course. Just very quickly to show you that in terms of funding under Horizon 2020, there have been many areas that have been funded. So going from clinical management and treatment to vaccine, but also public health measure, health system resilience. So really a breadth of projects in different domains, but all aimed at helping us to fight this pandemic. So what do we want to discuss today? So why are we here? So we are here to try to shed a bit of light on the role that AI and big data research can play in the fight against COVID, and try to discuss about all these initiatives and see if there have been relevant instruments in this fight against COVID, if AI and big data have been sufficiently exploited, but also what can be learned from this experience. There has been a lot of reactivity from the Commission side and the policymaker at the national level in redirecting funding, opening new research calls. What can we learn from this experience and this flexibility? But we also want to look at what have been the effects and the preliminary outcomes of the projects that have been funded, and then try to look at the future, so what needs to be done next. So this is a bit why we wanted you to join us today to have this discussion. And I would like to give the floor at this point to Ms. Rine. So Saida, if you're ready, I think I can give you the floor from here.
Yes, thank you very much, Martina. I think your introduction was very well coordinated with the first slide of my presentation. If you go to the next slide.
Sorry, it's taking me a bit of time, but now we should be there.
Yes, so here I wanted to say in the beginning to start with the fact that it's not only about funding and research funding, it's also about bringing together resources, data, expertise. The European Commission has been facilitating also the work of the member states on the contact tracing and warning apps that was just mentioned. And indeed, now we have the 3 countries that have signed in, and hopefully there will be more. There is also an initiative called AI Robotics versus COVID-19, where we try to collect ideas on deployable AI and robotic solutions. So really to look for mature solutions that could be deployed, and possibly with a few tweaks to really make them useful for tackling COVID-19. There's also a COVID-19 data portal to bring together relevant data sets on the virus, on the people who have got it, and so on. So in order to have for researchers a large variety of data points where to go look for data for the projects. There are also quite a few EU initiatives and projects, and also the Joint Research Center is working on computer-based modeling to estimate the scale and duration of the outbreak, to help monitoring, to look at the population level data, and so on. So it's there's a lot going on, and this started happening right from the start of the pandemic, and it's continuing. I mean, we are still there. The second wave is here. Just to say that not only funding activities, but coordination and support activities by the Commission has been actively going on for quite a while already. Next slide, please. I'm going to concentrate now on 2H 2020, or actually one of the 2H 2020 calls for expression of interest that took place recently to address COVID-19. In the Horizon 2020 work program under the Societal Challenge 1, which is on health, there was already a first expression of interest using emergency funding under this Societal Challenge 1 that was published already in January 2020. And as a result, the 18 projects were funded as of March 2020. So very quick, fast track call. The focus in the first call of expression of interest was on advancing the knowledge on the virus and its impact on infected persons, to look at patient management and so on. And one of the projects that was selected from the first round is called Escalate for COV, which is using supercomputers to research and look for molecules for drug therapy against COVID-19, so using high performance computing and big data. Next slide, please. The second call for expression of interest, I was involved in that one, and we started drafting the call text end of March. It was published on the 19th of May. The call was open only for 3 weeks and 2 days. And we managed to evaluate a lot of proposals, and the applicants were informed about the results already around the 10th, 11th of August. So it was a very exceptional fast track call that was for the first time for our DG to handle. Of course, our colleagues in the other DG RTD who had already organized the first call of expression of interest were of great help to us. And there, the second call was meant to complement the first call. It was not targeting any more completely new diagnostics, therapeutics, or vaccine compounds or solutions. We were looking for rapid delivery of innovative solutions to contain and mitigate the outbreak, and to have better care for patients and survivors and vulnerable groups. Also to protect the frontline healthcare staff and their communities. And really the focus was on innovative and rapid approaches. Also, the involvement of end users was highly emphasized in this second call. Next slide. The call had 5 topics. I will show them in a few minutes. It was targeted for making healthcare systems and societies more resilient to pandemics in general, in terms of prevention, protection, and treatment of the population and the patients. And then we wanted to see faster, more impactful, cost-effective, and large-scale implementation of these innovative solutions, and really to have readily available solutions that can be deployed in a matter of months. Next slide. So here we have the 5 topics. There was one on repurposing of manufacturing for vital medical supplies. The B topic was with us, so we were looking for medical technologies, digital tools, and artificial intelligence analytics solutions to improve surveillance and care at high TRL levels, and the total budget for this topic was 56 million euros. Then there was a topic on behavioral, social, and economic impacts of the outbreak response, and also 2 topics on COVID-19 patient cohorts. One was for like one big project and one CSA, coordination and support action. So I'm going to now concentrate on this topic B that we were managing. Next slide, please. We were looking for 5 different areas. We didn't restrict it in any way, so the proposers could come up with one or more of these areas in one proposal. First, we were looking for fast, cost-effective and easily deployable sampling, screening, diagnostic and prognostic systems. Secondly, environmental surveillance systems and data analytics coupled with them. And thirdly, low-cost sensors, smart wearable devices and robotics or AI for telemedicine to continuously monitor the patients. Next slide, please. The 4th area was about protecting healthcare practitioners and the general public, improving, for example, the different properties of fabrics used for face masks, sensors, and including robotics and AI solutions for disinfection and so on, in order to also to help with social distancing, both in healthcare environments and public spaces and buildings. And finally, we had a data topic or area, let's say area within the topic. It was about innovative data-driven services and tools, combining data assets from various privately held and or publicly available sources. And there we mentioned also the Commission recommendation on the interoperability of mobile apps, but this was of course only where appropriate to be taken into account. And of course, privacy and data protection and anonymity were very high on the agenda here. Then next slide, please. The expected impact of this medical technology topic was to contribute to public health preparedness and response in the context of the epidemic, to have diagnosis and clinical management of patients and survivors that comply with various parameters such as acceptability, adoption, appropriateness, feasibility, and so on. Then we would like these projects also to contribute to proposing recommendations for changes that would allow for a fast recovery and better preparedness in the future. And last but not least, to accelerate the deployment and market uptake of mature health technologies by delivering results within 3 to 24 months to end users at scale. Next slide, please. So what did we select? Well, first of all, there was a very high interest from the applicants. We received 221 proposals for this topic alone. 13 projects were selected for funding. In the middle, you see so-called innovation hubs. These are fairly big projects that include financial support to third parties. So there are open calls for startups and SMEs to address the same areas that I just explained, the 5 areas of different, let's say, use cases or technologies. And these 2 hub projects will have 7 million euros available for sub-grants to SMEs and startups, up to 100,000 euros per third-party participant. And also the hub projects, the COVID-X and Inno4Cov19, will provide support services for piloting, for helping to go to the market, to get the CE marking and so on. So it's not only sub grants that they provide, but also a large variety of support services. Then we have clustered the selected projects into 4 different, let's say, scenarios. There are 3 projects working on telemedicine and AI to diagnose and monitor patients safely and to reduce the burden of health systems. 4 projects are developing new point-of-care devices for faster, cheaper and easier diagnosis of COVID-19. Then we have ICU for COVID and Envision that are working on intensive care and telemedicine solutions. And finally, 2 projects, Clean Air and PORSAV, who are proposing new technologies to protect healthcare workers, to decontaminate air, for example, in operating rooms. I must say that a rather common denominator of most of these projects is that they are working in hospital environment in one way or another. Now the projects are about to kick off. So some of them have started already, some of them are going to start very soon. And we are creating a community around the projects. We are going to have extensive communication activities around them, also to put them together, to see if there are synergies, if they can learn from each other, if there's any way that we, the Commission, can help them to reach out to different other communities and so on. I will not go into more details on the projects, but you will certainly find them online. If not yet, then very soon. Just to mention that Inno4Cov19 has just opened its first call for sub-grants, so that's already open. Next slide, please. A quick overview of the country distribution of beneficiaries. There were altogether 133 organizations there are 133 organizations participating in the selected projects, and there are 25 different countries. Of course, this will change. There will be even more organizations and countries when we get the third-party funding up and running. Next slide, please. I think I did have one more at the end.
Sorry, very sorry. I'm checking right now. We will have it in 1 second, probably. If you want missing. Voilà.
Yeah, 2 more. So just to give an overview of coverage of the projects, of the different areas I mentioned, the 5 areas. You see here that the coverage is there, and again we hope to have an even better coverage after we get the sub-grants selected. Next slide, please. So as a conclusion of this experience of fast-track emergency call for expression of interest that we organized, such calls are possible. We can squeeze the time. I put here that it took 5 months, but in fact it took even less than that. So it was a lot of work for us, of course, to get all those 221 proposals evaluated, and it was, but also we had a very good collaboration internally in the Commission and with the external experts who were willing to help on such a short timeline. There was a very high interest from applicants to this topic in general, as I said. First results are expected from this call within months. I would say in spring there should be first prototypes, and hopefully with the collaboration among the projects we can even accelerate more the results. And also the hub projects are a very good way of accelerating the results and getting innovative ideas funded quickly and funded and deployed quickly. I would say that preparedness is really the key word. Preparedness in the future is something we should pay attention to and really look into that in the upcoming research work. As I said, the projects are collaborating, joining forces, and also adapting ongoing Horizon 2020 projects in order to address COVID-19 is possible. So the Commission has been very flexible there. Finally, I put a link to further funding opportunities. There's a lot out there. This was just one example. Thank you very much.
Shall I just get started right away?
Sorry, I was actually speaking myself unmuted.
Okay.
Very sorry for that. I was thanking Saila for an excellent presentation and mentioning that her points were really relevant, and I think the conclusion were even more relevant. And some of the points on preparedness, flexibility, I think we will pick them up in the panel at the very end. And apologies for being on mute. I think now the floor is all yours, Mr. Haider.
Well, thank you very much, Martina, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm very happy to have the opportunity today to talk to you about the German COVID-19 research network that we are currently trying to build. And I would like to start by showing you, next slide, please, who the partners of this network are. The network consists of all 36 German university medical centers. They are located in 14 out of our 16 federal states. It's important to note that in Germany, the federal states are individually responsible for setting up and operating the universities as well as the university hospitals. And the federal government has no constitutional role in structuring academic medicine. So therefore, we have not had in Germany to this point a joint research platform of all university hospitals on the federal level. The COVID-19 research network is the first attempt to create such a joint platform, and the first steps have started around about 6 months ago, and you will see this on the next slide. The original idea for creating this network, if we could get the next slide, please. The original idea originated in March of this year. Back then, there was the expectation that around mid-April, the intensive care capacities of many of the German university hospitals would reach their capacity limit. And as a result of that, there were large concerns that medical research would be severely affected in a negative way because a lot of the staff would be absorbed in patient care. At the same time, we had, of course, a lockdown also of research facilities that were only usable to a very limited extent. And during all of this, we also at the same time saw an explosion in research activity on the one hand, a lot of people starting projects on COVID-19, but a lot of this was very fragmented. Just two examples. We had in mid-March already about 80 plus COVID-19 registry initiatives in Germany alone. And we had about a dozen or more studies on convalescent plasma, usually monocentric ones, that were not coordinated amongst each other. So back then, the conclusion in the federal government was that in the face of severe resource limitations of research, we have a large necessity of pooling resources, of coordinating efforts, and making sure that we use our scarce resources in the most effective way. And the solution that the federal government came up with was that on March 26th, the Ministry of Research publicly announced a 50 million research project initiative for now scheduled for 1 year for creating a national COVID-19 research network. And the project started actually on 1st of April. So from the initial idea to the project start, it was about 2 weeks. The mission of the network, and you can see this on the next slide, the mission of the COVID-19 research network is to focus and coordinate COVID-19 related research activities on a national level. And the network strives to do this by facilitating interdisciplinary collaboration, very importantly also data sharing. I will get back to this in more depth later. The creation of research platforms and data platforms, and promoting networking on all clinical and research levels across all COVID-19 related issues. So translation obviously is a major task of the network, which is one of the reasons why it has been closely connected with the university hospitals. However, this not only involves translation into patient care in the narrow sense, but it also means translation in supporting pandemic management in a wider sense. For example, by informing surveillance and or public health strategies on the basis of new evidence or new available testing options. And the way to do this is by involving the academic medical centers also in the regional level, with all of the partners and stakeholders involved, from public health authorities to outpatient doctors to nursing homes. So regional networking of the individual academic medical centers is a large part of this initiative. And lastly, the network is supposed to improve pandemic preparedness in the long run by building sustainable solutions, knowledge bases, and also infrastructures that support pandemic preparedness, and of course also handling the pandemic situation. Next slide, please. The governance of the project reflects the necessity to act fast. I already mentioned that it took only 2 weeks to set this project up. In order to do so, a national task force has been initiated. It consists, amongst others, of representatives of the Federal Ministry of Health, the Federal Ministry of Research, 4 CEOs of German academic medical centers, 2 state representatives from 2 different federal states. And this national task force guides and accompanies the work of the National Coordination Office, which I have the honor to lead, This office is located in the Charité University Medicine, Berlin, the largest university medical center in Germany. And this medical center has been assigned the role of coordination in this national effort and of liaising with all of the other German academic medical centers. The work of the coordination office rests on two pillars. One pillar consists of 13 large collaborative projects. That's the pillar here on the left, each of which has its own steering committee and usually includes many of the 36 academic medical centers. The range, and you will see that later, is from 9 university medical centers in one project up to 34 university medical centers involved in one of these large projects. I will elaborate on these projects later. The second pillar here on the right consists of 35 local task forces that are directly attached to the executive boards of the participating university medical centers. And these local task forces actually collaborate with the coordination office primarily on the institutional level. For example, regarding legal or financial issues that need to be solved within the network setting. Each local task force also coordinates for its site all of the 13 projects that this respective medical center is involved in. And I mentioned before, each German medical center is involved in more than one of these 13 projects. So coordination within the individual institution is of utmost necessity and importance. Next slide, please. So what are those 13 projects that I have already briefly touched upon? As you can see, there are different university medical centers that are involved in all of these projects. We have 15 university medical centers that lead one or several of these 13 projects. So you can see from this slide that this is a truly national network effort. It's not all centered in the Charité, quite the opposite. The leads and co-leads of the projects are distributed amongst 15 university medical centers. A lot of those projects are covering a large part of the German academic medical center landscape. You see here in brackets behind each of the project the numbers of university medical centers involved. No project includes all 36, but all projects include a large part of the community. And I do not have the time to elaborate on all 13 projects, but I would like to remark on a few things. Quite a few of these projects revolve around creating large structured databases. This is, for example, true for the project number 1, the research data platform, which basically strives to bring together routine data on COVID-19 from all participating hospitals. It's closely connected to number 9, the cohort platform, which builds a large national cohort on COVID-19 patients, which has 2 primary areas of focus. First of all, to do deep phenotyping of patients. And secondly, to better understand what COVID-19 does with patients in the long run, what kind of long-term consequences the illness has. And in order to achieve this, we try to pull together clinical data, biosampling data, as well as radiological data to create a large cohort database of structured data. Another data-driven project would be number 4, our radiology platform, which runs by the nice acronym RACOON and involves 34 out of the 36 German university hospital radiology departments that try to bring together their radiology data on one joint platform in order also to, for example, develop AI solutions to support diagnostics. A very similar effort is number 6, the Emergency Care Registry, which tries to do a similar thing for emergency care data. And then number 7, the Autopsy Registry, which tries to bring together data from autopsies and also biosamples. So all of these things revolve around data, collecting data, bringing data together across institutions on a national level. Next slide, please. Here you see which hospitals have or participate in how many of those projects, and you see a lot of the hospitals involved participate in amongst 9 to 12 of these 13 projects. So we really have a very high level of engagement here of all the network partners involved. Next slide, please. Now, why is this network relevant for the issue we are talking here about today, big data and artificial intelligence application? I think the answer to that is that what this network does, it tries to bring together high quality curated data from a lot of participating partners on joint research platforms. And by doing so, we basically create the data foundation on which we can later on set up artificial intelligence solutions, artificial intelligence as a development tool to support research, to support diagnostic solutions, and so on. So basically, creating these large data sets is the first step. The second step would be to create a research and development environment in the network in which patient data, research data, and AI developers can be brought together. And in doing so, of course, by following all the necessary regulatory requirements, in particular, as soon as the development of medical devices is concerned. And thirdly, to also define use cases within the research network for AI implementation, as well for research as for patient care. So at this step, only 6 months after we have started our work, AI implementation is not the first priority. We are still in the phase of collecting data and bringing it together on joint platforms, setting up these platforms. As a matter of fact, the first patients will be brought into these platforms in the course of this week. That's where we are at this point. But once these data platforms exist and the data has been brought together there, I think AI implementation will be a natural next step, and we are already preparing and planning for this and would hope to be able to do so in the course of the next year. So this is my time for today. Please feel free to contact me anytime with questions. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was extremely exciting to see what's going on, and this network looks really a very nice initiatives. I think we're eager to discuss a bit more about also the creation, the establishment of this database, and what do you see, what are the challenges maybe that you're facing already in this step, but that we keep it for the panel discussion. So I think we can now move to our next speaker. We are now moving to the experience of the projects that have been funded and that have started to help to work on COVID-related topics in this year. The first one we will hear about will be presented by Ms. Anna Katani-Scholz from the Helmholtz Institute. It's a couple of projects, actually, not only one. So Anna, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, so I'm really glad to have the possibility to report on some of our activities at Helmholtz on COVID-19 research. And in the next slide, you can see that I am representing at this moment the research field key technology at Helmholtz. And if you, next slide, please. Can you hear me? Yes. And of course, we are focusing on all digital tools which can be applied in COVID-19 research. But if you move to the next slide, please, you can see that we have strong activities in many different fields. In energy, health and environment, health, aeronautics, space and transport, and matter as well. So the institutes are located all over Germany. There are 19 institutes and they have, most of them are involved in research on coronavirus. You will find more information at the link, which is now highlighted in the slide, and the slide will be shared later. Of course, today I will focus on some of the European projects in which we are involved, and some of them have already been mentioned. For two of them, we are coordinator as well. What is important that I would like to start to discuss at this point is that for our researchers, it was extremely important to have this strong infrastructure to start projects on COVID-19. So as you know, Helmholtz Association has very strong infrastructures, and so researchers could access, for example, the supercomputing centers at Jülich and start to screening of a drug potential target, or they could access the DAISY infrastructure in Hamburg and try to understand how the potential drug can interact with protein of the coronavirus. So the possibility to use very easily these strong infrastructures in Germany was also a chance for many collaborators in the frame of the Helmholtz Association. So we see again a map of Germany, but behind this map of Germany, there is a network of international cooperation, not only at European level, but at global level. And the second point that I would like to underline in this introduction is that in Helmholtz there is a strong expertise, of course, in health, but also in digital issues. So the researchers were able immediately to apply digital tools in research projects, and to apply, for example, artificial intelligence to extract knowledge for the huge amount of data available during the pandemic. At the same time, there was a lot of activities in order to develop some kind of tools to predict how the pandemic was spreading all over Europe. The next slide, please. Is dealing with maybe the most famous project in Germany, which is the development of the Corona Warn app. And here our institute, CISPA, together with the KIT, in the initial phase, were involved in the development of the technology behind this app, and now is still providing advice to clarify all the security issue associated with the app. The next slide, please. At KIT, we have also a lot of research devoted to understand, for example, how gas-borne particles and droplets are formed, they are spread and separated in the rooms. And this, you can imagine, is of crucial importance also for policymakers to understand, for example, if a place in the office or in the school is safe or not, and also to counter-react and develop, for example, a system to move the air in the proper way and prevent contamination. The next slide, please. The Helmholtz research centers are also very much involved together with other German big associations, and to develop a kind of data sampling activities. They are involved in LEOS, and they are trying, of course, taking care of privacy issue to collect patient data. This is a crucial point. I think we have to improve the collection of data, patient data at any level, because this is a huge amount of value that we cannot skip, that we have to invest in this to promote and to make people confident that they have to share their data, because this information can help not only to counteract the pandemic now, but also to counteract possible future pandemics. So we have really to invest time and efforts to make people feeling sure and comfortable in sharing their data. Next slide, please. And at the beginning, I promised to make a short resume of some of our European projects. I will start with this one. It was already mentioned by Mrs. From the Commission, and is about Escalate for coronavirus. And it's a project which involves 18 partners. And you see the name of the responsible on the slide. They are ready to answer to your question in the chat, but also you feel comfortable to contact them by email. And next slide, please. This project is much about screening, drug screening, and it is supported by 4 of the most powerful computer centers in Europe, not only the Jülich supercomputing center, but also, for example, the Barcelona supercomputing center or the Marconi 100 from Cineca. The project is also supported by the development of a proper exascale software for screening of billion of compounds. The main idea is to be able to identify on the drugs already available some compounds which are also effective against coronavirus. Next slide, please. And I would underline here that these kind of projects, of course, they can reach results here, but they can also be exceptional platforms for the future. They can help to counteract future pandemics as well. And one of the most important results achieved so far by this project is the isolation of a compound, which is a drug, which is a drug usually used for osteoporosis, and now is in a clinical trials for coronavirus as well. So this project has released already some very interesting results in few months. Next slide, please. The second project I would like to speak about is Quaresma. It involves 7 partners all over Europe, and is a project based on putting together information for different sources and try to get out some strategy to respond better to the pandemic. Next slide, please. It's based on the 4 different work packages and objectives. The first 2 rely with the real-time clinical data screening to improve risk assessment. The second deals on the idea to pick up some information from a serological investigation in different populations and to understand why some populations react better or not against the pandemic, against COVID-19. And to do that, some artificial intelligence and deep learning models are applied to extract information to all these data collected. In the next slide, we see some information about the third project at the European level, which is coordinated by the Helmut Zentrum in Munich, and is RIPCON. It involves 3 partners, and it deals with the rapid interaction profiling of 2019 COV for network-based deep drug repurpose learning. What's about? In the next slide. Next slide, please. You can see that the project is based on 3 main packages. In the first one, the idea is to try to understand how the human coronavirus, there are many, can interact with the proteins, and to understand exactly how this interaction is working, to understand better why the illness is developing. And the second package is more related to understand why the response is different in different populations, and to try to analyze this in relation to the genetic variation as well. The third package relies on the fact that if we wanted to have really a good candidate to counteract COVID-19, we need to isolate a drug, to repurpose a drug which is already present on the market, which is able to stop one of the key mechanisms which bring to the illness itself. So it's a very interesting project in which also here digital tools are key to solve the problems. Next slide, please. So first results regards the fact that already experimental interaction mapping is ready for all the 7 human coronaviruses. And it has been more than 800 direct interaction between viral and human proteins have been identified. So now the information is huge. It can be used to develop the next generation of drugs against the coronavirus. Next slide, please. So what have we learned in these first months of the pandemic and research on coronavirus? I would say in first instance that the impact can result also from collaborative projects in all TRL range. So impact can come out also from fundamental research. And we have to develop and establish very important collaborative research also between academia and industry to be prepared also to the challenges that are coming in the future. The second point which I would like to underline is that data sharing is key. To have immediately access to last results on research on coronavirus is fundamental. It can save lives. And so we have to invest a lot to establish a working platform for data sharing. And as I told you at the beginning, we believe that research infrastructures play a major role in research on coronavirus and should be taken consideration also for further investment. Next slide, please. So our recommendation in my last slide, we think that we need to develop predictive models with adequate resolution in space and time for decision support. Policy makers, they need this information and they need reliable information. We need also to invest more on a European app-based solution. I cite here a couple of examples of our institute in Braunschweig, Sormas and PIA, which are devoted to see how the pandemic and the contamination is evolving in different populations in different countries. And also in a special class of people which are immunodepressed. So we have to invest in a European app-based solution to catch up, to get this information that we need also to react properly, because a lot of things are known, but a lot of things are still not known, especially the effects over time of this illness. And then we have to increase resilience and to need to invest in collaborative projects in all the TRL range. Identify drugs is a very long-term process, and we cannot just wait for that, because if this time we may find a solution, next time we will have to have again a strong tool to look for new drugs. And of course, we have to invest in artificial intelligence and supercomputing platforms to be able to apply these extremely important tools in all the fields. And I would like to conclude with my last slide, please. Yeah, just say again that for Helmut's research centers, the international collaboration is key. We have many projects and we are very open for collaboration with everybody. So if you need more information, please don't hesitate to contact our expert, which I cite in the slides, and you can pick up even more information by having a look at our homepage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was a really, really interesting presentation, and your recommendations were also extremely relevant. I think this question of data sharing, but also research infrastructure, is something we might want to discuss further. But I think it's time for Andrew to take the floor and speak about the experience of CNECA with this project. Andrew, are you ready to go?
Yes, I'm ready to go.
Perfect.
Okay, so in this presentation, I want to talk about the Escalate project, which has been mentioned a few times already. So that means I can go very quickly. Next slide, please. Okay, so the Escalate project is a project which, as mentioned earlier, was funded by a sort of fast track process at the beginning of this year. So within a few months, the project was submitted, reviewed, and accepted. Official start date was April the 1st, but we managed to get going very quickly, so even a couple of weeks before that. The consortium consists of 18 institutions all over Europe, and it's headed by Dompe Pharmaceuticals, which is an Italian pharmaceutical company. The aim of this project is, well, it's got two aims. One is to find a therapeutic therapy against the current COVID infection, and then develop a platform for further pandemics. The structure of the project is that everything we do is shared. So open source, open data, open collaboration. And all the results we obtain from the project are shared as soon as they can. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mean, this is maybe trivial to some of you, but it's just to give you an idea on how the process works. So drugs are really small molecules which fit into the surfaces of proteins. Proteins are important because they're involved in all biochemical processes, and they're essential, for example, for in viral replication. The point about proteins is it's their 3D structure, which is important in their function. So if we can somehow bind another molecule to it, changing the overall surface of the protein, we may be able to inhibit this function. So if we found a virus, a viral protein, for example, and we managed to bind something to it, that could inhibit the function of the protein and so the virus itself. Next slide, please. So I think, well, again, this is very well known. Finding a new drug can be very expensive and take 10 years. We don't have 10 years, so we have to try and accelerate the process. And this is where computer-aided drug design comes in. In particular, a technique called virtual screening or docking. And in virtual screening, what we do within the computer, we try and bind different molecules to the protein and see which ones fit. So we have all sorts of different small molecules called ligands, and we try and bind them to the target protein. And if we get a fit, then that could be a good candidate for a drug. Next slide, please. So this is what happens in high throughput virtual screening. We start off with a protein target, and then we use a database of molecules. And this is really where the big data comes in, because this database can be very big. And thousands, 100,000, millions, billions, or even more. So what we do, we almost, as if we filter this database and find the potential drug molecules which attach to the proteins. And we use this using massive parallel computers. So this is something that can be done in parallel and can be done very quickly. Next slide, please. So what is the strategy of the Escalate project? So what we do, we're going to look at all the viral proteins. There are about 29 of them. Some of them perhaps not so interesting as drug targets, but anyway, we've decided to consider all proteins of the virus. Some obviously are more important than others. There's a class of proteins called proteases, for example, which are very important in viral replication. The idea is that we use the 3D structures of these proteins in our virtual screening process. And we're going to run the screening process on the supercomputers available to the consortium. In particular, for the virtual screening, we're using most of all the Marconi and the Eni supercomputers, which are currently the two most powerful supercomputers in Europe. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's two tracks, two phases to this project. There's a fast track phase. So we're going to start off with libraries of compounds which we know are safe, probably drug molecules, because it would take too long to design an ex novo drug for COVID. So this is the first phase, the fast track phase. But we're putting, we're designing for the future. So we want to have a platform that could deal with future epidemics if necessary. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our pipeline. So it starts off in the bottom and we need protein structures. We need three-dimensional protein structures. These can come from experiments, or if we don't have the experimental data, we have models. We then pass these into molecular dynamic simulations. So we do very long molecular dynamic simulations using the GROMACS molecular dynamic software. From these, we can obtain representative protein structures, which are then passed into the virtual screening. So for the virtual screening, we use a ligand database, and we use a software which is called Ligen, which is a virtual docking software, which has been designed, co-designed with Jenneke and Dompe. The successful results from this virtual screening can then be considered as in silico drug molecule candidates, which are then passed to the laboratory for in vitro tests. If we have further successful candidates from these can then be passed to clinical trials. Next slide, please. Okay, so all right, so this has already been shown before, but anyway, I'll say it again. So, in a test of 400,000 molecules in the virtual screening procedure, we found 7,000 candidates, and these were then tested in the laboratory. Of the 7,000, 100 of these were shown to be reactive against viral proteins, and 40 of these were shown to be effective in limiting virus replication. And one of these is raloxifene, which is an osteoporosis drug. This was a very interesting result because raloxifene is a known drug, it's a generic drug, and it's a drug about which we know quite a lot. As I wrote this slide, I just said that we already have made applications to the European Medicines Agency, but a few days ago, the Italian Medicine Agency, IFA, gave the okay for clinical trials of raloxifene in Italy. Next slide, please. So, okay, this is experience so far. We're just over a third of the way through the project. And I think it's not surprising, but collaboration with other researchers is absolutely essential. I mean, we rely on data and databases from other groups all over the world. The Escalate project shares data in various ways. So, for example, there's this so-called drug box where other researchers, a group, are invited to send us molecules for testing. And then we have data which is available from the website. We also had a very useful collaboration with the Eni Italian energy company, because as it would happen, just as we started the project, we didn't have the computing resources available in Jenneke. There's quite a few challenges and things like this. I mean, networking events are important. When you're doing everything online, you can't meet people and so on. But this is the project. It got off to quite a rapid start with no particular problems, and we're hoping that we'll find further potential drug molecules in the future. Final slide, please. Okay, just a few acknowledgements, and of course, thank you to everyone involved in the project or in the field, and particularly to the Commission, of course, for providing the funding. And that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I think it was really, really impressive, and I think it's also good news to see that some ideas are brought to clinical trial. And I also like how you liked the fact of the challenges that the COVID is imposing, also in terms of collaboration that is not face-to-face anymore, in a sense. I would like to give the floor now to Paolo so that we can give him the time to go through his presentation, of course. And then I think we'll have some time for discussion. I saw already a very interesting question from Jack in the chat. So, Paolo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Martina, and thanks for inviting me. I'd like to go directly to skip a couple of pages because there is not much time left. Next, please. Next. Okay, so let's start from here. The project that I coordinate just started. It was mentioned before in the beginning by Sila. No? It belongs to the second wave of projects funded but under the Coronavirus Global Response Initiative of the European Commission. The project was selected the 11th of August, and it actually started 2 days ago. So we are clearly at the very beginning, but this short time span has already been quite useful, to set up the team and to understand what are the issues and ways to overcome them. The project belongs to the topic that was described before by Sila as the socio-economic and behavioral area. So the idea here is to develop resilience of Europe in terms of the trade-off between the epidemiologic and the socio-economic impacts. No? A trade-off that we often hear, and for which we need also some kind of response. So the aim of the project is to develop, to suggest policies and technologies aimed at understanding and responding to the issue of finding the right trade-off, let's say, between epidemiologic impacts and socioeconomic and behavioral ones. So to do this very difficult task, as it can be understood from the scope of the call itself, we are putting together a large team of researchers coming from different areas, indeed. So for us, interdisciplinarity is really key, and it is also difficult because we put together researchers in economics, researchers in the medical field that often have different languages, and also we want to develop solutions that are testable and understood by citizens and by the regulators and the authorities. So that is what we call the engineering part, to put in the technology down to ground. So to integrate this in different fields, we of course we are within the topics of the BDVA, in the sense that our process is the process of collecting data, analyzing data, and using AI and statistics at large to build technologies and solutions that can be utilized by citizens and by governments. So in that sense, we follow the chain of the SRIDA, the new BDVA version, in which there are the 3 steps of data, AI, and robotics. For us, the robotics is let's say, the automation of policies, if you wish. The difficulty of this is that before we go to the next slide, the difficulty is to shorten the chain. As was said before, one may think to collect data at first, then do the AI, and then develop the technologies. However, this may not be very useful under emergencies when we have to respond. So this is the question mark from which our project starts. Please, next slide, please. So, yes, I'm sorry, I have to go by one by one. So our model to respond to this very difficult step of shortening the chain is to work in parallel with 4 different clusters. The first cluster, I simplify saying that we collect data. We do research in on health systems, on mental health, on socioeconomic impacts. This goes into a cluster that you see to the left that we call DIG, meaning data, collecting data about impacts of the pandemic. In a second cluster, we analyze the data that come from the first cluster, but we do not wait until the first cluster is full. We start the analysis from the very beginning using advanced machine learning and statistical explainable techniques to understand what's going on. Then results from this statistical analysis are put into a cluster that is called governance. So in which the idea is to develop policy suggestions and technological practices that can be implemented in smartphones, for example, to let's say mitigate the effects, both and especially under the socioeconomic points, for example, with financial aids. Fourth cluster is about the actual the feedback from this implementation, to understand from the citizens and from the authorities whether the proposed solutions do work, how effective they are, and how efficient they are. That is what we call cluster 3. As I said, these 4 activities are not done in sequence, otherwise we have to wait 3 years to produce results, but they are done in parallel. So the first results from the first technologies are expected to come very soon, because they are based on previous European projects as well. Next slide, please. So the number of partners is very large, as you can imagine, because the project involves 4 different aspects. There are a number of universities, research centers, hospitals, authorities, association of patients, and so on. And so it's going to be clearly very interesting, but also challenging to put together all these various actors. And I must say that the call was a very good occasion, because in a very good push for us, because in only 3 weeks we had to write down a project putting together different views. And so these 20 days were very useful to grow, for us in a very quick way. And this, I think, is a good example because, this call really motivated all of us to go more into depth in our specific areas. Because, we need to deliver results so quickly that we have to be vertical, but also talk to each other at the same time. Next slide, please. Yeah, the next 2 slides are about some details of the project, meaning, that tell you, that we, of course, we are, no, excuse me, go back one second. We are really somehow within the idea of the circular economy. We are not doing things from scratch, but we are using existing resources. For example, results that we get from previous European projects, of which some of them are involved. For example, the PULSE project was about understanding the impact of the of pollution on the environment, on the health of the people. CoronaNet is about collecting data on the pandemic policies. VPRN, as you know, is a repository of research in the area of COVID. We have another project in the next slide that is called FinTech, aims to develop financial technologies to be of use of the citizens to facilitate financial aid. I mean, these projects were put together and assembled to the goal of the COVID-19 response. So I think this is also a suggestion that can come from us, also to the European Commission, to extend this kind of quick and fast-track calls aimed at a very specific problem, because this helps a lot also the interaction between previous European projects and projects that work in related areas. For us, was very beneficial. Please, next slide. Yeah, this is about details of what we will go through, a number of issues. Go on. Yes, I don't think there is too much time to go into detail. This is important. It's about the organization of the project. I would like to say that at the top, at the bottom of the slide, you see the interaction. It was mentioned by Sila also at the very beginning, the idea that for this project to be effective, you really have to talk with stakeholders. In our case, those are the health institutions, like Federation Academy of Medicine, European Patient Forum, Mental Health Europe, and also health authorities like regions, as was mentioned before about the German research projects. In many European countries, there are the health is managed at the regional level. So EUREGA, for example, is an organization of many regions, because we have to speak same language also in terms of data. When we say we collect data, we need, in my opinion, to collect them in agreement with who will use the data, for example, in agreement with the policymakers. Otherwise, if we develop ontologies that are not understood by others, it might become a problem of dissemination. We may do very nice research, but it cannot be communicated in the proper way. So talking with the stakeholders from the very beginning, it is very key. Please, next slide. This is about the support institutions we have, but there's no time to go too much in detail. Next, please. Okay. This, at last, I want to bring some, very specific examples, because I didn't say in the beginning, but I'm a statistician, so I'm used to work operationally, so to demonstrate things on data. This is an example of the impact that you can have when you analyze data in a let's say good way, from a statistical viewpoint. Even if you do not have many data, you can leverage the existing data with smart techniques that are also explainable. In this example, it is an example about companies. It is about financial inclusion, the idea of using a relationship between companies, for example, expressed by the belonging to the same territory, or belonging to the same associations, or having similar structure of the balance sheet. This is a data that exists already. We don't have to collect, but no one is using this data, or very few banks or institutions are using this data. If you use it, you can get very important information, for example, that can help you to predict the default of a company. So if you want to give an aid to a company that in this case is green, so in good state, but close to a red one, maybe it's better not. This is something that would help a lot in preventing crisis and preventing a distribution of financial aid that is not very effective. Next slide, please. These are deliverables of the current project that are based also on previous work. Here's another example on using explainable AI, which is key when you want to deliver AI results to stakeholders, to authorities, to institutions. You cannot deliver black box results. These tell you which variables, for example, are more important in predicting the sustainability of a company, of a business. Using Shapley values, a technique from explainable AI, you can tell company by company which are the factors that affect the trust on that company, the sustainability. This is about sustainability, which is another key point that if you go to the last slide, please. That's my last slide. To say that the message that I would like to share with you is that for us, although we are at the very beginning of the project, but the call has been a very good occasion to grow in experience and in relationship with many other European projects. And I think that this should be pushed further, because collaborating with other projects that exist is very key to share experiences, and maybe I suppose for the European Commission to share best practice in an easier way. No? In the specific case, I would also like to see maybe more calls or more collaboration in the area of developing sustainable AI. No? Applications of AI for which we measure the risks, not only the opportunities, so they are sustainable. For example, within just as an example, the Green New Deal call, I would see very well, the implementation of financial technologies, as I showed you before, in a way that is sustainable and effective too. So those are just suggestions, because Martina asked me to bring our experience. Clearly, it is based on a few days of work of the project, but really it is since end of May that we are working on this project, and I'm very glad that this occasion came from the European Commission. It is a very, very important occasion of growth for researchers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paolo. I think I really liked several things of your presentation. It was an excellent presentation, in particular the reference to the reuse of what exists already in a circular economy sense, and also the experience of putting together a proposal in 3 weeks. That's also hectic, I imagine, but it went well in your case, so well done. So I don't think we really have the time for a full roundtable discussion, unfortunately. However, and sorry, I'll put my video, but you will see me reading, because we have a very interesting question from Jack from the question and answer chat. And I would like to close by asking all the speakers maybe to give their views on this specific question. So I'm going to read the question aloud. So Jack asks whether COVID-19 will accelerate the development of data sharing infrastructure in the health sector that can even be scaled up to other medical domains. In that way, bypassing the long-lasting discussion about medical data sharing spaces. So I think it's an excellent question, and maybe we can close with this. So is COVID accelerating data sharing between projects, between institutions, between organizations? I don't know, Saida, if you want to give your 2 cents on that, and then everybody has the possibility to reply, of course.
Yes, thank you. It's a very good question, and the answer is definitely yes. We have been seeing it already, because the need for having interoperability, data sharing structures, it comes from the real world, and there's the urgency to do something. And at the same time, on the Commission level, we have the data strategy, we have the European health data space that we try to build. So it will accelerate all these developments and initiatives that we already have. And I was very glad to hear from the previous speakers that they appreciate the networking between different projects and putting together like maybe interdisciplinary groups. And so this is for me a very important feedback, and we will definitely take it on board also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saida. Mr. Haider, you also mentioned data sharing, and the initiative that you're managing was created in the urgency of COVID. So is COVID also accelerating data sharing between these organizations?
Well, thank you for this excellent question. I absolutely think so. What we have seen is that with COVID-19, the readiness to explore new solutions that were just not an option even a year ago has really increased vastly. I definitely think we will be able to create infrastructures for data sharing, very high performance infrastructures, in fact, in a very short time notice. Whether, though, these infrastructures will also be used for other use cases beyond COVID-19 in fields like oncology, neurology, etc., I think that will remain to be seen. But for COVID-19, I think we have leapt forward in a really short amount of time drastically. So yes, I really think we are seeing some fast and exciting progress.
That's really great to hear, and it's good to have this optimistic view. Let's see if the project also shares. So Anna, what do you think? Is it data sharing increasing due to this crisis? How do you feel from a project perspective?
Yes, I think it's a chance. No, we have also a chance during the crisis, and this is the chance that we can get. We can improve our technology, our infrastructure for an effective data sharing. We need also repository chances for that, clinical data and genetic data. We need to invest on data in any case, and I'm very happy also to have heard that the Commission is working on the Health Research and Innovation Cloud, because I think this is the right way to proceed to invest on a central solution. Sometimes the sum of different parts is not the best solution. So we need really to work for a central solution.
Thank you very much, Anna. So Andrew, you're already sharing all your data through open source publications. So for you, data sharing is natural, but how do you think that this is maybe being picked up by others as well? Do you see more data sharing?
Yes, I think so. I mean, without the data sharing, or we wouldn't be able to get started. It's not always trivial how to share data. So, I mean, we worked quite hard just to put it in a cloud, for example, and how to actually share this data, is to make it available for everyone is not obvious all the time, but we're working on this, and I think it's really, really important, and I think there has been an acceleration in how data is being shared and the importance of it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Andrew. So Paolo, you have the last word before I close the session. So how do you feel?
It's high responsibility. No, of course, I believe that data sharing is necessary, but it's not so easy to realize it, especially across Europe, because the different countries have different legislations, different regions have different rules. So it's not so easy. But I would like to say that it would be important at the European level to develop some minimum standards of data sharing, as is done, for example, in the financial sector. No? All banks in each country have to send certain data to the central bank so that the central bank can analyze and supervise. Maybe a similar idea could be done also for the health sector, if it's not already being done, because it would be very important to compare policies across Europe, not only within single countries.
Thank you very much, Paolo. That was an excellent closing point. And I think I don't want to keep our guests, our attendees any longer than you. So we were supposed to finish 2 minutes ago. So that's very unlucky. We don't have the time for a panel, but I think that's what happens when we have such interesting presentation. It's always the case. So I hope you enjoyed this session. On the behalf of BDVA, I really warmly thank our speakers, because all the presentations were really, really interesting. And I think we had a very nice discussion. So I hope it was also the case for you. You had an enjoyable experience. And I would like to close here this webinar and wish you all a very, very nice evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.